We're bringing you Easy Choice, presented by Geico. Jamie Eisenberg and Heath Cummings are with us here on HQ for a Week 11 fantasy preview. And Jamie, we're going to start off talking about the Bucs and the 49ers because that game includes your start of the week, Brock Purdy. He's coming off a 3-touchdown performance against the Jags. What else are you expecting for him against this Tampa Bay team?
There are two things, Jacqueline, that I love about Brock Purdy. He's at home. And he's got all his buddies with him.
Yep.
You know, so whenever he's been at home, 7 times in his career he's played in San Francisco, and all 7 times over 20 fantasy points. And so I think that will be the case again. You know, and the first time that he made his first NFL start was against the Bucs in Week 14 last year. He beat Tom Brady head-to-head, had 25 fantasy points in that game. So he knows his defense. Not really about Tom Brady, although we miss him with all the quarterback plays. Maybe he'll come back and help the Bengals out. But in any event, I think you look at just this matchup. It's great. 26 or more fantasy points for 3 of the last 5 opposing quarterbacks against this defense. So I like him. Now on the other side, I'm going to sit Chris Godwin. It's been a frustrating year for him, and I know this secondary is the beatable part of this defense for San Francisco, but it's really all about Mike Evans at this point. I think he's just been so consistent, and that's the guy Baker Mayfield's leaning on. Godwin, I know, had the illness last week that led to sort of the disappointing performance, but you see where he sets up here. At best, the number 3 receiver, that's even in PPR. So I don't really love the setup for Chris Godwin. And then you saw the DFS play. Deebo Samuel is as cheap as you can find him for what his production could be. Better in this format where it's half PPR as opposed to full PPR. He'll probably get a rushing touchdown because that's what Deebo Samuel does.
Yeah, I actually downgrade Mike Evans just a little bit in this game as well. You're starting him, but he's more of a low-end number 2 wide receiver for me. I full expectation is this 49ers defense, by the time we get to the end of the year, is not going to look like a good matchup for anyone, including wide receivers, who they have been a little bit leaky too so far this year. As far as DFS goes, I'd also love to have Christian McCaffrey in my lineup. I don't care what the price is. His upside is so much higher than everyone else's. This is a game you got to target for DFS.
And you talked about it, Brock Purdy with his weapons back. We talked about it yesterday. Not only Deebo, but Trent Williams, him being back, is huge for Brock Purdy. Heath, let's talk about a divisional matchup with the Giants and the Commanders. Regardless of their records, these teams always play each other tough. And the thought is it's going to be a big week for the Commanders' run game. So insert Brian Robinson.
Yeah, a guy who had a monster week last week, but not running the ball. Only had 8 carries for 38 yards, but he caught 6 passes for 119 yards and a score. You shouldn't expect that again, but with Antonio Gibson now doubtful and we're not expecting him to play, that does open up a lot of running back targets, which have been a huge part of Eric Bieniemy's attack here with the Commanders. At least 5 targets in 3 straight games for Antonio Gibson. When I removed him from my projections, Robinson went from a top 12 running back to a top 5 running back. I probably won't rank him quite that high, but he's must start, no doubt about it. We were hoping Jahan Dotson was moving into that same range as a guy that you could just start without really even thinking about it. And, you know, it kind of coincided, that surge for him, with Curtis Samuel's injury. We saw Samuel come back last week. Dotson completely disappeared from the game plan. 2 targets, didn't catch either of them. I'm not sure this is quite as many pass attempts as usual for Sam Howell, though I do like him a lot. He's my favorite DFS play in the game because his price is just $7,700, and because when you look at the main slate, a lot of the top quarterbacks not playing on it. We just saw Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow play on Thursday Night Football. We've got Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts playing on Monday Night Football. Howell actually projects as a top 4 quarterback for me on the main slate on FanDuel this week. I
cannot believe that Heath did not mention one member of the Giants. I mean, this is the team that everybody should be talking about, the New York Giants. No, you should not be talking about the Giants. Saquon Barkley, though, it's obviously...
I was going to say, what do you do if you have Saquon Barkley?
You start him in redraft leagues. You avoid him in DFS. You just got to hope that, because, as you mentioned, the game is close, that the Giants show up. If they show up offensively, it's not because of Tommy DeVito. Love the story, but it's going to be because of Saquon Barkley. So you got to hope that he's carrying this team on his shoulders. This receiving core is bad. The quarterback situation is bad. The offensive line is bad. Big week for the Commanders, DST, if you need a replacement option.
Yeah, Tommy DeVito can have his mom make his bed and he can live at home. And
I'm jealous.
Yeah, that doesn't bother me, but I need Saquon to step it up because, as you know, he is in my lineup. All right, Jamie, let's talk about the Raiders and Miami. Miami, they're pretty darn good at home. They're 4-0 at home. And you like Raheem Mostert. He is dealing with some injuries. He has been over the past couple of weeks, but you're expecting a big game from him.
I think he's kind of the under-the-radar play of the main Dolphins guys because of Devon Achane coming back. You know, we've seen certainly the big plays, the splash plays from Achane, and it's no guarantee that he's going to step in and have a full workload, while Mostert should. And the guys have coexisted together. We saw it in the Broncos game, for example, when Achane had his big breakout moment. The Raiders are number 8 in most fantasy points allowed to opposing running backs, so I'm still firmly entrenched in the Mostert camp, and I think he's a great DFS play as well. And then for Jacoby Myers, you see him as a sit guy here. He was so good with Jimmy Garoppolo, and he's been so bad with Aiden O'Connell. In the 3 starts that O'Connell has made, Myers has 6 catches. Now, some of that is a byproduct of the last couple of weeks where the run game has been successful. They're probably chasing points here, so Myers maybe has a little bit more room to get some production, but the Dolphins secondary getting healthy, and that's a big problem for Myers and potentially Devontae Adams as well, as long as we have a healthy Jalen Ramsey and a healthy Xavier Howard on the other side of the ball. So don't love the setup there for Myers, but certainly very excited about Raheem Mostert and even Devon Achane. Hopefully he's going to play and play well.
Yeah, you mentioned Jamie Myers has 5 or fewer targets in 3 straight games. All right, Heath, let's talk about the Cardinals and the Texans. The quarterbacks here are fun. We have C.J. Stroud on one side, who has been in that MVP conversation, depending on who you ask. And then we have Kyler Murray, who just came back for the first time this season in that win against Atlanta. So how are you handling these 2 quarterbacks?
Listen, I think this entire game is fun. If I was going to build a whole bunch of stacks for DFS, this is one of the games that I would want to target. I think Tank Dell, you get excited about maybe what Devin Singletary, James Conner, all these guys. Stroud is the one quarterback that I am sure that I'm starting. I've got a lot of quarterbacks this week projected for 20 fantasy points, 16 or 17. And so you really have to stand out to be a start at quarterback. CJ Stroud has stood out all season long, averaging more than 22 fantasy points per game. He's been a borderline top 5 quarterback. Forget about top 10. He's a great start in this matchup against the Arizona Cardinals. I'm a little bit less excited about starting Kyler Murray, and it's not because he looked a little rusty throwing the ball last week. I expected that. I was actually very encouraged by what he did with his legs. I just think the week is so strong at quarterback, you don't have to force him into your lineup when we haven't quite seen him look like himself as a passer yet this season. So I will sit Kyler Murray for one more week. Do think he could be a league winner in the fantasy playoffs, along with his teammate Trey McBride, who is the absolute free space in DFS at tight end this week. We talked about the quarterbacks that we don't have them on the main slate. We don't have Mark Andrews or Travis Kelce on the main slate either. Trey McBride actually my top projected tight end on the slate regardless of price, and he's only 5,900. Put him in your lineup, build everything else around him.
All right, let's talk about DFS lineups. Jamie, walk us through yours first.
No, I agree with Heath. McBride's going to be my tight end there, but I'm going to stick with the start of the week and go with a 49er stack here with going with Brock Purdy and going with Brandon Ayuk. You can clearly stack Purdy and Deebo Samuel, but it's not the smartest thing because of how Deebo gets his points. But I do think Kyler Murray is going to have a big game. That's why I have Marquise Brown and McBride in the lineup here. I think Brown is going to have a big bounce-back performance against the Texans team that's really been struggling against #1 wide receivers. You kind of see a little bit of a theme here of guys that are ready to bounce back and play at a big level. Tony Pollard has been awful, really bad for a big stretch of the season since week 3. But the Panthers allow the most touchdowns to opposing running backs. They have an opportunity here for Pollard to sort of get going a little bit, and I love the setup for them. And you want to talk about free space? Play the defense, taking on Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Put the Steelers in your lineup.
I obviously agree on Trey McBride with Jamie. I've also got Terry McLaurin. He absolutely torches the Giants. I will pair him up with his quarterback. Once you get past those 3, there's 2 things that I really want to do this week. Play Christian McCaffrey, play Tyreek Hill. Those 2 might combine for 60 FanDuel points. You're halfway to cashing with those 2 in your lineup. That doesn't leave you a lot of money everywhere else, though. So I've got some cheaper guys like Michael Wilson, Tyjae Spears, even James Cook's priced down. What those 3 guys all have in common is that they can score from just about anywhere on the field. You're not hoping for a huge target or huge carry day from any of those 3 players. You're hoping they score touchdowns. I was only left with $3,000. We'll put the Panthers in. Hope Dak throws a pick off somebody's hand and returns to the house.
I was going to say.
Could be Cooper Rush.
Yeah, or it could be Cooper Rush. If it's the Panthers, I was like, ooh, it's a little wonky. But I guess if you only got 3K, that's what you got to roll with. Heath Cummings, Jamie Eisenberg joining us for a Week 11 fantasy preview. And guys, I didn't ask one question about my fantasy team.
You threw a little Saquon Barkley.
A little bit. But Lige he was quizzing you, asking you some questions off camera, Jamie. But yeah, here we are.
It was more hindsight for him. Did he make the right decision about Lamar Jackson versus Brock Purdy? And I think he did. I think Brock Purdy will have a big game. I like Lamar, but Purdy will go off. But we're talking about our starts and sits on our Fantasy Football Today podcast. We already recorded our mailbag for the weekend, so getting everybody set for those Week 11 fantasy rosters. Want to make sure you win with the playoffs coming up.